Tensions are still brewing after U.S. officials visited Taiwan, with China saying this undermines peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. We get insights on how this might impact nearby countries from Straits Times global affairs correspondent and China expert Ben Kang Lim. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, living in China and visiting the Philippines, how serious is this current cross-straits tension between China and Taiwan?
Right. Hi, Rico. Thanks for inviting me. The two-time Malaysian Prime Minister, Mahathir, has accused the U.S. of trying to provoke a war in Taiwan. Critics will argue that he's 97 and senile, but others will assert that he's bold in speaking the truth. Right. I've worked as a journalist in Taiwan for 15 years and in China for 24 years, and I've never seen China so peeved. Right. Of course, the Pelosi visit meant that Taiwan just scored a diplomatic victory, but I think it'll be a Pyrrhic victory. But to put things in context, I think all sides practice restraint this time, including China, Taiwan, and of course the U.S.
So Ben, if you say that you've never seen China so peeved, could this escalate into a full-blown conflict? Could Taiwan be the next Ukraine?
Well, manageable tensions are not necessarily bad for all the stakeholders, right? So I don't think it'll be a full-scale or limited war at this juncture. The intended or unintended consequences of the Pelosi visit means that for the U.S., it's an opportunity to sell more weapons to Taiwan. They can rally like-minded democracies to demonize and contain China. But for China, this has galvanized the Chinese nation. At the same time, it has diverted attention away from China's woes, including slowing economy and tough COVID measures. They've also been able to regularize drills, right? And this is now the new normal. And for Taiwan, like I said earlier, they just broke out of diplomatic isolation, and at the same time, they're able to seek the support and win the sympathy of Western democracies and Japan, as well as rope in the U.S. to defend Taiwan.
Ben, I want to see how this impacts the Philippines. You know, there were no comments from President Bongbong Marcos on Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, or the military drills of China and the rhetoric from the mainland. Is he moving in the right direction in terms of its independent foreign policy strategy?
Right. Of course, this event, the Pelosi visit, as well as the consequences and the upcoming events, I think will be a real test of our independent foreign policy, whether it is truly independent. But I think the visit of Bongbong, PBBM, to Indonesia and Singapore in September, I think the Philippines and other ASEAN nations will be able to, I think, come together and make a strong statement that we want peace in this region. So yes, it's the PBBM has not, he's playing his cards close to his chest.
So
he has not, right.
Yeah. So you mentioned about those state visits to Indonesia and Singapore in early September. I'm just curious. With his independent foreign policy, why not visit the U.S. or China, or both?
Right. Well, the U.S. and China have been trying to, force us to choose sides, but I think PBBM has decided against visiting the U.S. first or China first, right? And so it's going to be Indonesia, which is the biggest ASEAN nation and which is the host of G20 this year, and which will be the ASEAN chair next year. So Indonesia, it's understandable. Singapore, I think it's for Singapore, PBBM, I think, will be able to exchange notes with Lee Hsien Loong, the Singapore Prime Minister, about how to forge peace in this region. Because if you remember the 1974 trip by Imelda Marcos to China, this led to not just the normalization of diplomatic relations the following year, but it also ended, or not ended, but China pulled the plug, or China stopped arming and funding the Communist Party of the Philippines and the
Ben?
NPA.
Ben, I'd
Right?
also like to ask you about his trip to the United States. Now, he'll be visiting New York in mid-September to speak before the UN General Assembly. What do you think should he be talking about in his speech?
Right. I think, of course, it won't be a state visit to the U.S. I think you, of course, will be talking about COVID cooperation. He will be talking about regional peace, I think, right, because of the Taiwan Strait crisis. And I don't know if he's going to mention his mother's trip, because I think his mother and his dad prevented the spread of communism back in 1974. This time around, Lee Hsien Loong, the Singapore Prime Minister, and the Indonesia, as well as the Philippines, they face a new challenge, and that is how to prevent a war in this region. Right? So it's not just stopping the spread of communism. It's about, this time it's about, preventing a military conflict.
So, Ben, briefly before we finish off on this interview, the maritime dispute. Despite international pressure, China is not heeding the Hague ruling. Do you think the president will give China a deadline to respect the 2016 Hague decision before his term ends in 2028?
I don't think PBBM will give China a deadline, because that'll be shooting ourselves in the foot, right? But PBBM has said we will continue to talk to China, right? And that disputes we can agree to disagree, and we can settle disputes through negotiations. So I think he will try to be, play both sides. He'll try to balance, not play both sides. He'll walk a diplomatic tightrope and try to balance our relations with both China and the U.S.
Ben, thank you so much for your insights. Straits Times Global Affairs correspondent and China expert, Ben Kang Lim.